Hello and welcome to the Copper Link. This week we'll be talking about story events. And to do that, I'll be using a slightly different format. Instead of just telling you about the cards, I'll highlight them by showing how they were used to perfection in a certain deck type. First of all, some background. Story events was a mechanic that was released during the Valyrian block, which came out during the fall of 2004 and the spring of 2005. A story event was simply an event that had the story event trait and a special symbol ahead of the name. Then there were a bunch of other cards in various houses, mainly Stark and Lannister, that had good synergy with story events. The deck type I will be highlighting is how House Lannister took advantage of story events right after the final ones were released in A Reign of Kings. There were other decks that also took great advantage of story events, but this deck highlights the period when the mechanic was most abusive. First, let's take a look at the story events themselves. Part of the strategy of the deck is to stop your opponent from declaring challenges against you. To help with that, you had 3 events that limited what characters could do challenges. The main one of these was Hidden Poison, which said that only characters with an intrigue icon can be declared in military and power challenges. There were also events for the other 2 icons, but these were not as useful, so they saw less play. But in this deck type, they were still used at times. The ultimate card you used to deny your opponent's challenges was Tyrion's Chain. This was a card that you had to set up by having 3 story events in your discard pile, and also having more story events than your opponent. But when that was set, you had a powerful card that stopped your opponent in their tracks. Another card that was a huge advantage was Twist of Fate. If your opponent did manage to get a challenge off, then you could use this event to nullify their whole challenge, if they only had attacking characters with more than 1 icon. Another story event that was used a lot in these decks was The Only Game That Matters. The deck usually ran Wildfire Assault, and playing this event right after a reset, when your opponent only had good characters, was always great control. Another event that occasionally saw play in this deck was Archery Contest. This especially comboed well with Tywin Lannister, who was a staple in this deck type, since you played so many events. Finally, there is one of the most brutal events ever printed, which also was the first card to be limited to once per game. Free Hospitality lets you search through your opponent's deck and remove 4 cards and put them in the discard pile. This could often be devastating if you could get it off early. So now you have a bunch of events. As most of you know, having an overload on events is not always great to make an effective deck. Fortunately, Lannister had some of the best card draw the game has ever seen. These decks usually ran Lannisport Tony Grounds. At the time, each copy could potentially give you 3 cards per turn, and they were non-unique, so you could have more than 1 in play at a time. Also, jousting is a big part of the deck's strategy. Since you often restrict your opponent's chance to attack, it meant they often had lots of defenders standing if they happened to go first. By jousting, you could make sure that you got your challenges through anyway, no matter how many potential defenders your opponent had. Lannister also had more cards that synergized well with story events and the deck's strategy. Archer Champion and Elder Septon were used to further deny your opponent's challenges, or you could use them to get unopposed when you were attacking. Archer Champions could stand when you played a story event, and to stand the Elder Septon you could use the Heart Tree Grove, which also let you stand a character after playing a story event. Since the deck had a lot of these stand effects, it could also use Flea Bottom to great effect, which was also released at the same time. To throw salt in the wounds, it was also fun to throw in Anguy the Archer to combo with Archer Champions and Elder Septons. To round out the deck, you could usually throw in a bunch of toolbox cards of the time, and other cards that synergized well with the deck. Tony Equipment Boy added some location control. Tavern Bard was a nice Tricon with 3 strength if you had 3 story events in your discard pile. King Joffrey comboed well with your other strength reductions. Littlefinger was a staple in most decks at the time, and Lannisport Merchant was also a new card at the time that added some attachment control. As for plots, this deck didn't really need to do anything fancy. It usually only ran Wildfire Assault as a reset, and other than that, it mainly ran various search plots, or some soft control like Filthy Accusations. At the height of its power, this deck was a real negative play experience. This eventually led to a bunch of nerfs. Tyrion's Chain got a limit of once per game, just like Free Hospitality, and Twist of Fate got an errata that you had to have a participating character to be allowed to play it, so that at least made it a little harder to abuse. Lannisport Tony Grounds later also got limited to once per phase, so now you can only get 1 card per copy you had in play. Still, the story events and the synergies were still there for the most part, so the deck type remained strong for years to come, even after new decks emerged that became more popular. So that's it for this week's edition of the Copper Link.